Good evening, everyone. What I had mentioned earlier is the fact that instead of teaching students about speech pathology, specifically pediatric feeding is what I would teach before, I'm now going into programs, into schools, and talking about positive mental health. How can you maintain positive mental health? And I'm still keeping up with some of the literature in the field, on listservs, on Facebook pages. And the number one thing that I see is people being mentally drained because they're not doing self-care. So I just want to remind my title is that it is not selfish, that if you don't take an opportunity to care for yourself, then your body is going to react. And we're going to talk about how that body-mind connection is just so very important when we're talking about maintaining good mental health. So, just a little bit about me, as I had mentioned before, I retired and now I've opened up an LLC in order to do these presentations and to really work with other instructors about mental health, first aid, and other programs. So, what is mental health? When we think about mental health, what we're thinking about is that it is a state of well-being. In other words, we all come to mental health in different ways. We all react to things in different ways. And what we want to maintain is that state of well-being. When we think about positive mental health, we're really talking about the fact that an individual is able to realize their own abilities, that they can cope with the normal stressors of life, they can work productively, and that they can contribute to the community. Now, this doesn't mean that a person who might experience a mental health challenge or is diagnosed with a mental health illness doesn't mean that they can't have positive mental health. If that person is able to reach out for help, if that person is able to, if they're prescribed medication and is working for them, maintain that medication, then that individual is in that state of well-being. And we know that that needs to be nourished, not just by the person, but also with where they work, what they do in their community. All of those things are things that we really need to consider when we're talking about maintaining that positive mental health. It also has a cultural impact. You know, when we take a look at culture and health in general, we make different health choices based on a number of things. We make health choices based on who told us what was good health and what was bad health. When we think about our family members, when we think about what health means to us, what does it mean to have good health? And for some of us, it might be a little bit different than others. If you suffer from chronic pain or chronic illness, health could be the fact that you even woke up this morning. Health to you could mean that I was able to walk from my bedroom to the bathroom without assistance. And other people are like, oh, I don't even think about it. I'm healthy every day. But we also have to think about what causes good and bad health. And that is a culture in itself. When you think about what your grandmother might have told you causes a cold, telling you, girl, don't go outside with wet hair, or you need to put your shoes on, otherwise you're going to catch a cold. We also have to think about who we go to for support. Do we always head immediately to a doctor? No, for many of us, we go to family and friends, especially if we have elders in the family. I know my children will text me pictures and say, well, what is this? And I'm not the medical doctor. So we have to think about who we go to support, not just for physical health, but also for mental health. And we have to think about our values in terms of how important it is to maintain that well-being, that healthy mental health choice. And that gives us what we need in order to make sure that our behaviors, the things that we do, also maintain that mental health healthy mental health, as well as the ability to function in our lives because of we're well in terms of our mental health. So we talked a little bit about uh, mental health, but we also want to take a look at that mental health challenge because many of us who are feeling stressed have that mental health challenge. It's not at a crisis level. It may not even be at a level where you're diagnosed with a mental health illness, but it's something that does impact us on a daily basis. When we think about a mental health challenge, we're really thinking about what is that major change in that person's thinking, feeling, or acting. Is there something that they're doing that's very different than any behavior that they've shown before? Are they always coming in looking sad? Are they always disheveled looking? Or is this a new behavior for them? Are they showing absenteeism or presenteeism? So, absenteeism is just that they don't show up for things that they used to show up to. Presenteeism is when they're coming, but they're not participating anymore. And what we want to be able to do is to notice that not just in other people, but also in ourselves. You know, do you always go bowling, for example, and you just decide for almost a whole month that you're not going to go anymore, and you really don't have a good reason except that you just don't feel like going. And so that might be a change in terms of thinking or feeling or even acting. When we look at that change, it interferes with that person's ability to live their life. So people are depending on them, and they're not showing up. They're always complaining about even very small things that they used to not complain about. And when we're looking at that mental health challenge, we're really talking about something that does not go away quickly, and it really lasts longer than typical emotions or reactions might be expected to last. I can be sad, but that doesn't mean I'm depressed. I can be unhappy, but that doesn't mean that I have some kind of a mental illness. I can show one part of myself 1 minute and another part of myself another minute, like going from happy to sad, but that does not mean necessarily mean that I'm bipolar. Um, if I'm behaving in this way for a very long period of time, I usually say more than 2 to 3 weeks, or it really is affecting my ability to um, uh, hang out with my friends or go to work or go to church, then I really think that that is that mental health challenge that we have to consider is affecting our life. So we've had that challenge, and again, most of us will have had challenges across our lifetime. But we also have to think about mental health disorders because oftentimes, especially in the Black community, these are things that are not diagnosed readily, or people just say, well, that's just them. When we really want to think about that mental health disorder that's impacting this person and the treatment or the help that they should get in order to be able to function in their life. So again, it does affect their thinking, their emotional state, their behavior, but it also really disrupts their ability to work, to carry out daily activities, and also engage in some kind of a satisfying relationship. So, they complain about being lonely, but because of their mental health diagnosis, then they may not be able to maintain those friendly relationships. And when I talk about diagnostic disorders, I'm talking about something that's been diagnosed by a psychologist or a psychiatrist or a social worker that has the degree and the training in order to do that. So we're talking about things like bipolar. We're talking about obsessive compulsive disorder. We're talking about attention deficit disorder, those kinds of things that need to be diagnosed. So I want to show just a really short video that talks about the difference between good mental health challenges, and a mental health disorder. Can we see that? Is it
No,
showing up?
no.
It's not showing up. Okay. That's because, okay, let me stop the share for just a minute. And I'm going to click on this.
Health and illness, two different ends of the continuum, right? Why then, when we add this,
How about
do the
now?
two get confused for one another?
Just words.
If you ask someone what they
It
think of
says,
what
it
be a
says,
mental health,
Let me stop it.
okay.
It says I'm
Okay.
screen sharing.
Okay, now it's on. I see mental health.
Now you see mental health. Okay,
Yes.
great. Technology is wonderful when
Yes.
it works.
often they'll think depression, anxiety, or bipolar, when in fact these are mental illnesses. If we consider mental illness as a continuum where one end is severe mental illness and the other is no mental illness, where someone sits on this continuum is determined by a combination of individual, social, and environmental factors. Traditionally, the focus has been on mental illness and how to help people who are ill become well. But that is only half the picture. Good mental health is defined as a state of well-being where one realizes their own potential and can cope with the normal stresses of life. What if we added a vertical line to represent mental health, with the low side representing poor mental health or languishing, and the top representing high mental health or flourishing? It's important to note that languishing does not necessarily mean that someone is experiencing a mental illness. Feelings of low or poor mental health, being disconnected, and having low coping abilities can be felt by anyone. In contrast, a person in the flourishing zone is high functioning, resilient, and well connected to life, with a sense of purpose and energy. And we can experience this while still having a mental illness or not. A person may have sought appropriate help or treatment, be looking after themselves well, and be experiencing good mental health and flourishing. Awareness is half the battle. Understanding where we sit in this continuum helps us take appropriate action to improve our situation and help us thrive, whether we have a mental illness or not.
So that just gives us, I think,
At Wristband Bros, our wristbands are fully
a
customizable. Your design will be stamped into the
one
band
second.
itself and filled with a durable silicone ink.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Did you know that just one workout can alter your brain?
I'm trying to stop this. There we go. Exit, stop. And then I'm going to close this out. I love technology. I really do. Um, what we're talking about here is the fact that oftentimes people think that what's going on with them could be a mental illness and they're reluctant to go and get help. And what, as the video mentions, the fact that you are not flourishing doesn't mean that you have a diagnosed mental illness. It just means that you're somewhere on that continuum when we're talking about mental health. And so we always want to make sure that even if that person is expressing something to you about their mental health, that what we want to do as professionals is to lead them to a professional that can help, or for yourself to go to a professional that can help. What we know in terms of how common things are, 1 in 5 adults are diagnosed with a mental disorder in a single year. Almost half of all adults in the US are going to experience some kind of a mental health challenge that may or may not lead to that diagnosis of a mental health disorder. And when we take a look at our college students, if we're working with college students, about 50% of college students say that they have moderate psychological distress. And I would guess, I haven't seen a research on SLPs and psychological distress, but I would imagine we're probably at 50% or higher in terms of the psychological stress that we experience on a day-to-day basis, no matter where we work, and that about 22% of students will report serious psychological distress to the point where they feel that they need some kind of medication or they feel that they need to go to see a professional. When we take a look at some other things to consider, about 54% of adults who are diagnosed do not receive treatment. And there's a number of reasons for that, right? One is cost. Another one is stigma. Another one is availability. Again, especially in the African American community, we often want to find someone who looks like us, and there aren't that many. If you take a look at uh, suicidal ideations, about 4.3% of adults have serious suicidal ideation. And when you look at the number of providers in the United States, one provider would cover 350 adults, which means you have a long wait time or you don't get weekly services. And that can all assist our mental health as being not good because of the fact that we don't have those providers. Now, there is 988, which is 24/7, and that's nationwide, and that's great, but it's not a consistent person to provide therapy, and they will say that themselves. You can text, you can call if you're hard of hearing. They do have a video line that you can use. They can find interpreters to use as well, but again, that's not usually long term. What they want to do is help you to find that professional help that you might need. When we look at stress and trauma, and I think sometimes working in the places where we work, you're going to have that trauma that occurs because of a patient or because of a client. So we can respond to stress in different ways. People have heard of fight or flight. Well, there's also freeze. Freeze meaning that I can't move. I can't move forward. I can't function. Flop. I just don't do anything. And then the other one is friend, which where people are trying to make friends because they don't want to have that stress. They want to be able to hand it to you so that you become their pocketbook rather than looking for that professional help. Stress and trauma also limit our responses if we think about the effect on the brain. So we've got acute stress, we've got chronic stress, and that's going to impact the ability for our brain to react to any of those things that might be going on. We have a biological response. There is that mind body connection. We can have illnesses, pain in different places, chronic headaches, not eating well, so it affects our metabolic system. And what that results in is cognitive distortion. So we have emotional, cognitive, and behavioral problems. All of those things are impacted by stress and trauma on our brain. So, how do we take care of our mental health? Well, what we want to think about is self-care. And self-care is that practice of taking action to preserve or improve our own health. Yes, I know we need to help other people. We're in the helping profession. But it's also really important for us to be able to preserve our own health because if you cannot function, you can't help anybody. I say that we have to recognize when we need to refuel with self-care. How do you know you need to refuel? Does anybody have, any ways that they know they need to refuel on a daily basis or even a weekly basis?
Um, Sometimes I do like meditation.
Mm-hmm.
I join like a little app and it gives me like they ask me if I want like 5 or 10 minutes of meditation. So
Mm-hmm.
I go and I do that
Okay.
for self-care. Sometimes I might take a nice walk outside.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah, all of those are great ideas, but how do you know you need to have that? What do you
um,
feel like?
when I get upset with students.
Yes,
Yeah,
or administration.
that too.
Yep. Or you
Yeah.
get one more email indicating that they're going to change yet again how they do IEP meetings, or the schedule has now changed, and that group that you finally got to gel is
Yes.
now going to be split apart because they changed, the school schedule.
Yeah.
I often say that my car tells me I'm 25 miles till empty, right? And
Uh-huh.
I have a choice. I can fill it up or I can run out of gas. and I don't want to run out of gas.
I
So
understand.
what I need to think about doing is, how do I fill that up? On an airplane, they tell you that you need to put the oxygen mask on yourself first before you put it on anybody else. And so when we think about what self-care will do for us, we're talking about the fact that it will improve our overall mental health well-being. It does boost immunity. When you are stressed, your immune system is weakened, and you have a greater chance of obtaining any of those wonderful diseases that children carry around, or other people that you work with, carry around. It lowers heart disease. It decreases inflammation. It helps in terms of stress management. It overall reduces your healthcare costs because you're not going to the doctor as often, nor are you receiving as much medication as you would have received previously. So it also decreases morbidity and mortality. Yeah.
For me, it decreased my blood pressure.
Yes.
Every time with the college when I go, my blood pressure goes up. But since I started the walking and the meditation, it
Hmm.
works out pretty fine. And sometimes, when I do teach sometimes in class, and if the class is not going to us, I think we need a break,
Yes.
a little 5 or 10 minute break.
Yes.
I think everybody needs it.
Everybody needs it. Yeah. My daughter, she teaches the high school mental health first aid too, and she makes them do head, shoulders, knees, and toes
Oh,
when they start getting, a little rambunctious. She says, okay, everybody, we're going to do head, shoulders, knees, and toes. And she makes them stand up and do it. And it's funny, the kids love it, because it does give them that kind of, mental break that they need to have. My husband does brain teasers or brain busters, when he teaches his adults, because again, what you want to be able to do is kind of stop those thoughts of how horrible things are and doing something that's a little bit different. So, self-care again is one of those things that we put on the back burner, and we shouldn't. We should think about this just like we think about getting up and knowing that we have to eat. It doesn't make a difference. Well, sometimes it does, but as long as you break that fast in the morning, it could be a granola bar, it can be a protein bar. But as long as you break that fast and you think about sustaining yourself throughout the day, you want to do that with self-care as well. Some people say eating is a self-care uh, a strategy. Eating good things, not when you're stressed, because you can sometimes overeat when you're thinking about that, but you don't want to do that. So remember that, you have to, what you have to be able to do is to make a plan. And we think about it. I'm going to go to the gym. And then, I don't know, the phone rings, or, you pick up a book, or all of a sudden you see out the corner of your eye that your favorite movie is on. And so you never do that thing that you plan to do. But if you remember that if your cup is empty, you can't fill up anybody else's cup. So you want to build resiliency through being mindful. You mentioned meditation. I'm not a meditator. I go, squirrel. But I can learn to relax, because what I found was all this tension was in my neck and my shoulders, because would be like this. And it's like, okay, no, you need to relax. You do that, s- you know, something I can touch, something I can see, something I can feel, something I can smell. Or even doing finger tapping. Let me put my hands up here, where you're doing like this over and over and over again, because then it kind of takes away again, those thoughts. Or you'll have people they'll give themselves deep pressure on certain areas, or they use is it Reiki? Massage on their toes, where they, kind of squeeze a toe pad in order to, again, focus. So you want to remember that you're not alone. Boy, we're a community of SLPs. So when you start feeling yourself becoming stressed, call somebody up and say, I just need to vent for about 5 minutes. That kid today, I'm not going to give you their name,
mhm.
but they came into the room and they were just ready to rumble. And I just, so at least that venting will help to decrease that stress. Be kind to yourself. I'm not saying, that we need to buy stock in Starbucks, but if you need a Starbucks break, then take one. If that's what helps to relieve some of that stress and tension. And there are lots of different things that you can think about doing. There's one method of planning called wrap planning. And that is when you are writing down different things that you can refer back to. Or with smartphones, you can put it in the notes section of your smartphone. You want to think about a daily maintenance plan. What can I do to stay healthy today? We're not talking tomorrow, 3 months from, but today. What am I going to do to stay healthy today? I'm going to write down who my supporters are. Now, this was written for someone who was in recovery from a substance use disorder, but I think it applies to all of us. Who are the people I can call? Because sometimes when you're in the midst of that stress, you can't think of who I can call. But if you've written it down, you can, tap that thing on your phone and go, oh, yeah, I forgot. I can call. I can call Terry, and she'll understand what I'm talking about. When we think about healthcare, if you've put off doing that mammogram, if you've put off doing that pap smear, then you need to write that down. Schedule my mammogram, schedule my pap smear, schedule a visit to my dentist because I haven't been in a while. And what do you do? What do you need, or what do you need during the day? I have medications that I must take and I kept forgetting them. And so now I have a different, A, I've written it down, and B, I have a different way of reminding myself that these are the pills you take in the morning, these are the pills you take in the evening, and they're out in front of me so that as I walk by the microwave, I know that it's there. So you want to write that down. You want to write down triggers. A trigger is, who or what is going to trigger me to do something that's unhealthy for me. So, with the medications that I take, I cannot consume alcohol. But always the first thing people say when you get stressed is what you need is a good stiff drink. And I think, yeah, but that's not healthy for me. So I want to walk away from some of those triggers. I want to walk away from some of those activities or people, or learn how to cope with them. How can I cope with you? Well, I can listen non-judgmentally. I don't have to respond. I can ignore your phone call or your text, and it'll be okay for me. Or, like I used to tell my kids, I'm going to put myself in timeout for 5 minutes until I'm ready to deal with you, and then I'll come out. So you want to think about those triggers. And then what are those early warning signs that you know that will cause you to spiral, and decrease that wellness that you have in terms of mental health? And you want, again, to write those down in a way that you can think about that wellness recovery action plan. So things you've done to stay well. Well, here's what I did. I increased my sleep from 4 hours to 6 hours. That doesn't seem like a lot, but it is if you're a person who has insomnia, right? Um, um, I need to decrease the amount of caffeine that I consume. So my plan is I'm going to do it by 2 cups a day, and I'm going to uh, uh, look at water instead of coffee, right? So no, I'm gonna drink some water. I'm gonna take two 15-minute walks per day. Before I get to the point where I know I have to take a walk, I'm just gonna schedule that into my activities so that I'll know that that's what I have to do. And then the other thing I can do with a RAP plan is to write down those things that I've done to feel better. You mentioned an app on your phone. Well, there's the Calm app, right? Call and fill in the blank to discuss a time to get together for lunch. Ignore calls from until I'm feeling better and I can talk to them in a rational manner. And you don't have to tell them you're ignoring them, but you just don't take that call during that time because you need to make sure that your mental health is important. Another thing that you can do um, in terms of your maintaining your mental health is something called the SAMHSA 8 Dimensions of Wellness. And SAMHSA is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Board. And they developed this. You can look at, if you go to SAMHSA.org, they will have this plan, and we'll talk about it in a little bit more detail. But each of these areas are areas that you want to develop a plan about, because each of these are areas that impact your mental health well-being. So if we take a look at things like intellectual wellness, that involves the things that keep our brain active, the things that allow us to expand. And that when we think about stress, we know that that stress really impacts our intellectual abilities, right? Has impacted our ability to even think about puzzle solving as one of the things that we can do. I don't know about anybody else, but sometimes when I am really in that state of not having good mental health, I can't read a book. I mean, the words are there, but I don't really understand it, or I can't follow directions like a recipe. So I know that that's one of the things that I might need to do to improve my intellectual capacity and write a goal about that. Emotional, what is causing me emotional distress? Um, is there something in my environment when I think about, like, sometimes my office gets, well, let's say a lot of the times, my office gets messy, and I find that environmentally, if I don't have at least a space that's clear, then I can lose that well-being, my mental health well-being. Physical, we all know, because first thing people say is, you need to do something physical, like lift weights or go to, Pilates or go to yoga. Well, I live with MS. And so there are a lot of things that I can't do physically, but that doesn't mean I can't find something, or that my plan will be to find something I can do physically. I found chair line dancing. So I like to line dance, and when I'm healthy physically, then I can do it. Well, when I'm having a hard time standing or walking, then I can still do line dancing sitting in a chair. So YouTube does a wonderful job of giving you some of those options. So my plan would be to do chair line dancing at least 2 times a week. I'm not going to be ridiculous about it and say I'm going to do it every day. Spiritual, we also know about, and spiritual doesn't have necessarily mean religion. It can mean a number of things. One of the things that we want to think about is financial. And oftentimes we don't want to think about that, right? But how much do you spend on Starbucks? How much do you spend on when you wander through Marshalls or TJ Maxx here in Ohio? What are you doing for self-care in your community? One of the things that I do is for my mental health is I make cards, handmade cards. And I make much more than I would, some of them I sell, but others, every quarter, I will put a number of cards into a large envelope and send it to some of the residential facilities in our area, because there's many people there that never get mail. And so when I send it to the recreation director and say, please distribute these to some of the residents that don't get mail. And so, especially around Valentine's Day, Easter, Christmas, those are the times that people usually expect to get cards. I even send some birthday cards in there and say, if somebody's coming up with a birthday. And then occupational. So if you work for yourself, what do you do? If you work for a company or a corporation, what do they do to help with your overall wellness? And people say, well, I can't control that. And well, you can ask, you know, um, do they build in flex time during the day? Do they allow you to have at least 30 minutes for lunch? I know where I used to work, they didn't. You had to catch it as you could, and that's not good for your overall well-being. So again, what you want to think about doing is developing, this is just a little bit more information. I'll put that in the middle, kind of about spiritual and social and emotional wellness, and those things that you want to think about. How motivated are you to change any of these things? Do you want to do that capacity building in terms of intellect? You want to do self-mastery in terms of emotional wellness. You want to think about integrity or engagement as we are improving our overall mental health. So what you want to do is develop those SMART goals. You want to be specific. What are you going to do? You're going to be measurable. What will you use? Up to solve typo. What will you use to measure success? Is this really something you can achieve? You know, I'm not going to run the Boston Marathon, so I shouldn't even make that as a goal, right? Is it realistic? Is this something you really want to do? And then make it time bound. I'm going to do it for this date to this date. And then once that date comes, reevaluate. What do I need to change in my goals? We know how to write goals. We write them every day. But do we write them for ourselves? And the answer is probably nope, we don't. So once you've done that, put it up someplace where you can see it. If in your kitchen or in your bathroom or in your bedroom, so that you can wake up every morning and take a look at it and go, well, I'm feeling kind of low in this area mentally, so I'm going to work on this goal today. You don't have to do all the goals, all 8 areas. You don't have to write more than one goal, but the idea is to take some time for yourself because that is very important. So here's just an example of, I'll improve my intellectual mental health by listening to a humorous podcast. I'll improve my financial well-being by making an appointment to talk to a financial advisor. I'll improve my environmental well-being by cleaning out, and it's specific, the red file cabinet in my office, right? I have 3 file cabinets in my office. I didn't say I'd do all 3. I'm going to do one because that's going to help. I have a do not keep pile. Have I shredded it? No. So a goal is to shred that or filing any of the papers, well, it would be 2005 now, but, 2005, not just have them stacked up someplace because we should really only touch a piece of paper once, but we all know that's not what we do. So you want to think about that as well. Okay. Yep. My mouse just died. Where did we go? There we go. Bum, 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 bum. Also, you can think about just making a pyramid, and this is colored, doesn't have to be. And when you are feeling some of those intense feelings, you want to identify this is a really intense feeling. Okay, what can I do to move myself down to that moderate level? I know in some of the schools they use that, is it like red, yellow, the yellow area, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, we can do the same thing as adults. Make it any shape you want to make it. If you make it white, you can just, okay, I, it's really intense, but I need to bring it down, and here's what I'm going to do. And if it's only a quarter of the way, then, color that part in. How am I going to make myself calm so I can work through these areas? So identify those feelings because oftentimes, again, our mental health is affected by the feelings that we have and how we do what it is that we do. When we're a professional, know your resources. Where can you go? What can you do? Clarify your role in schools. We often don't do that. I read that so much, where people say, well, they didn't and they didn't. And I go, well, what did you do? And people go, well, and I go, if they don't know, they don't know, right? And even if you've told them more than once, you can decrease your mental health anxiety because you can say, here's my role and stick to it. I always say we need a backbone, not a wishbone. If they're asking you to do something that's outside of your scope of practice, nope, can't do that. Here's the state rules and regulations for what I can do as an SLP in the schools. And so what you're asking me to do is outside of my scope of practice, and I'm not going to risk my license for that. You can explore the policies in your school system. What do they say about mental health? And your mental health days are your mental health days. So take them. I know I left a lot of sick days with OU, and I should have taken them. And so I'm, imploring people, if you have paid sick leave, take the paid sick leave. If you have vacation time, like Miss Terry mentioned before, take the vacation time because if you're not there, they're going to find somebody to replace you. And so, you need to take care of yourself and figure out what supports are there from you. I see a couple of things in chat, Terry, and I can't access that right now. So do you know what somebody's saying or what somebody's
Yes,
asking?
yes. Um, Ideli Hicks, she says so true things that
Uh,
you're talking about and what you just stated today, like take your vacation time or take
yeah.
your sick day. She said, Amen.
Yes, take it. So the program that I'm with is called Mental Health First Aid, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about that because it is nationwide. My company travels, we travel. Um, so if it's something that you can, that you have a group, I'll give you a QR code at the very end. You can contact myself or my daughter is part of the business with me and talk about, okay, how can we present first aid mental health? It's about a 6.5 hour program if you want to be certified. We can do, and it can be done virtually. We can also do a shorter version that's about 3 hours, and that can also be done virtually. Although, if somebody wants to pay me to come to New York, I wouldn't have a problem with that at all. But we know that mental health first aid is needed because there has been that significant increase in mental health issues, especially suicide. Um, People are often slow to seek treatment due to stigma and they don't know where to turn. So, as a mental health first aider, you can help guide that person to the professional help that they need. They may not need a psychiatrist. They just may need somebody helping them to figure out what self-care is. And that because there is such a demand for mental health professionals, that mental health first aider can help to bridge that gap. Again, I'm not a therapist, I'm a speech pathologist, but I'm not a mental health therapist, but I can at least be someone who can, there are certain steps, there, it's called algae, certain steps that I can use to help that person to encourage them to get the support that they need. Because if they don't seek treatment, it can be harmful. It can lead to death. And heaven knows we already have enough risk factors in the world that if we don't at least seek that treatment, then that's something that we want people to recognize and understand. So effective, when we talk about mental health first aid, it's most effective when it's early intervention. So the sooner you can connect someone or yourself to professional and self-help resources, the better the outcome for that person is. Recovery is possible from a mental health challenge, from mental health illnesses. It is possible. And it's important for us to remember that. When we look at the goals, as a mental health first aider, we want to grow in terms of our signs and symptoms and risks and be able to talk to somebody about it. I always wear 4 rings on this hand and 1 ring on this hand. It's a habit. When I was teaching, a student said, Mrs. Wright, are you okay? And I went, yeah. They said, you're missing a ring. So just that small sign, somebody has changed their behavior is enough. And they ask that question, it's enough for them to go, oh, okay, you noticed something was going on. We want to increase their confidence in terms of finding help. We want to increase their mental wellness, and we especially want to reduce stigma of mental illness. It occurs, it's out there, but it's nothing to be stigmatized about. And oftentimes that person feels reluctant to talk about it because it is such a stigma. In my house, what went on in my house stayed in my house. I don't know about anybody else. But, we want to be able to share that information. So the way to get started is to quit talking and begin doing. That was by Walt Disney. And so what we want to take a look at is how can we help other people? And the first thing we do is by helping ourselves and recognizing that that mental health aspect is so very important for us. So we want to make a plan. We want to write ourselves an individual mental health wellness plan, so that we can every day carry out into the world what we want the world to give back to us. So here is the QR code, also the phone number. This is my other company called Mental Abundance, where we do trainings for a variety of reasons. Again, we can do it virtually. And so you can reach out, and you'll probably talk to, not probably, you'll talk to my daughter and also our assistant, whose name is also Terry, by the way. And we can, talk to you about possibilities and even set up some things if it's something you're interested in, as well as the mental health first aid uh, training for people who want to be trained as a mental health first aider. Okay. So I thank you. Again, here is my email address. Terry has it, so you can talk to her as well. And then, are there any questions that
Yeah.
somebody might have?
I don't have a question. This is Ayadeli Higgs, but I
Yes.
have a comment. This was so timely, as so many of us, especially as SLPs or even my generation, we're like sandwich generation,
Mm-hmm.
dealing with our parents and dealing with our children and all the stressors that brings and just dealing with our own selves.
Right.
This was so timely. This
Yeah.
was perfect. And especially when I heard there's